We come to 1st and 2nd Kings. In this period of about 385 years, Israel had over 39 more kings and queens. 39.
Wait a minute. If you become king and you stay king for the rest of your life, so how can one country have 39 kings and queens in 385 years?
Because Israel didn't remain just one country. This is a consequence of Solomon's sin.
That's right. Solomon sinned by worshiping idols, fake gods, and he also sinned by grabbing too much stuff for himself. Horses and wives and gold. And he also forced the Israelites to build huge palaces for him and places to keep all his stuff. This was sin too. The guy in charge of all this stuff for Solomon was a guy named Jeroboam. One day, God sent a prophet said that because of Solomon's sin, God was going to take Israel away from him and give it to Jeroboam.
Disobeying God has consequences, and for Solomon, those consequences were finally coming home.
After Solomon died, his son Rehoboam became king. All the Israelites came to him and said, "Your father was very mean to us. He worked us very hard. If you're more kind to us, we'll follow you." So Rehoboam went to his friends and asked them what he should do. They said, "Hey man, you're the king. Show him who's boss." So Rehoboam went back to the Israelites and said, "Wait till you see how hard I'll work you."
That seems like a really bad idea.
The Israelites said to Rehoboam, and I'm paraphrasing, "Phooey on you, we're not gonna follow you anymore." And so they made Jeroboam their king.
Just like the prophet has said, God took Israel from Solomon's family and gave it to Jeroboam.
What about God's promise to David? God gave David's grandson, Rehoboam, one tribe to rule Judah.
That's right, though technically it was 2 tribes, because teeny little Benjamin did whatever big brother Judah did.
So the kingdom of Israel split in two. No wonder why they had so many kings and queens.
Yep, Jeroboam ruled over the 10 tribes in the north. His kingdom was called Israel. Solomon's son Rehoboam ruled over Judah.
Did Jeroboam help the northern tribes follow God?
Well, he could have, but he didn't. Jeroboam was afraid that if the northern tribes went down to Jerusalem to worship God, that they would want to join Rehoboam's kingdom again and follow him. So Jeroboam did something very, very bad.
So Jeroboam didn't want his people to go to Jerusalem to worship God. So what did he do?
He built his own places to worship in the northern tribes.
Yep, and said to Israel, "Here are the gods that brought you out of Egypt." And so they all started worshiping Jeroboam's golden calves. Israel walked away from God again.
Why did God choose Israel? So he could show himself to the whole world, his holiness, his love, and his justice.
So the whole world would be blessed through Israel.
Right, but Israel was breaking God's laws. If they continued sinning and God didn't do anything about it, the world wouldn't learn who God really was and about his holiness.
Oh dear, does Israel's next king turn things around?
Nope, not at all. Jeroboam is king of the northern tribes, which is now called Israel. Then his son Nadab became king. He's just as bad. 2 years later, a guy named Bahasha kills Nadab and he becomes king. He's bad too. After Bahasha, Elah becomes king. He's only king for 2 years, and then the commander of half of his chariots, Zimri, kills him and he becomes king himself. Everyone's mad that Zimri killed Elah, so they surround him, and Zimri burns down his own house while he's still inside it. So next, the Israelites picked a guy named Omri to be their king.
Was he a good king?
The Bible says that he did more bad things than all the kings before him.
Oh my, it's hard to find a good king.
Yes, it was. Especially in the northern tribes. As bad as Omri was, his son Ahab was even worse. Bad, 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 bad! He married a woman from another country named Jezebel and made her his queen. She was so evil that 3,000 years later, even today, a sneaky woman is called a Jezebel. Jezebel didn't believe in Israel's God. She worshipped a fake god named Baal, as in Bachi. She also wanted Israel to not worship the real God, so she hunted down all of God's faithful priests in Israel and had them killed.
This point of Israel's history is where the prophet's saying, "Stop it, or there's going to be trouble."
The 2 prophets we hear most about in 1st and 2nd Kings are 2 guys with very similar sounding names. Elijah and Elisha. God used Elijah and Elisha to do all sorts of interesting miracles. Elijah first appeared in the reign of the evil king Ahab and the nasty, mean queen Jezebel.
She wanted to kill all of God's prophets, so Elijah had to go hide in the wilderness.
God was tired of his children worshiping Baal. He wanted to show once and for all that he was the true God and that Baal was fake. So he had Elijah challenge 450 of Jezebel's prophets of Baal to a little contest. Elijah had them build 2 altars. They put wood on top of the altars and then the sacrifice on top of that. Usually, now the priests would light the wood on fire to burn the sacrifice. But Elijah said, "Nope, we're not going to start the fires. Instead, all of you prophets of Baal call on Baal to start the fire, and I'll call on Israel's God. Whichever God lights the fire first is the real God." Jezebel's prophets called on Baal all morning. They screamed and shouted. They even beat themselves and cut themselves with swords to get Baal's attention. But nothing happened. After a few hours, Elijah started making fun of Baal. He said, "Maybe your God is asleep. Or maybe he's in the bathroom."
This is my new favorite Bible story.
Did Baal ever show up?
Of course not. He's fake. Now it was Elijah's turn. Only to make God's power even more clear, he had them drench his altar in water. Everything all soaking wet. Then Elijah prayed and said, "Answer me, O Lord, so that the people will know that you are God." Fire came down from heaven. It burned up the sacrifice. It burned up the wood. It even burned up the rocks that were underneath it.
Wow, I bet that got the people's attention.
It sure did. All the people fell on their faces and cried out, "The Lord, He is God." When Israel follows God, He blesses them and He protects them to show the world His mighty power.
But when they ignore God and worship fake gods and not the one true God, bad things happen.
So the world could see how holy He is and how much He hates sin.
So the Northern Kingdom had some pretty bad kings leading up to King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, who were downright evil.
Jezebel was really mad at Elijah for defeating all of her prophets, so Elijah had to go hide again. But finally King Ahab was killed in battle, and Queen Jezebel, well, she was so evil that 2 of her servants picked her up and threw her out a 2nd-story window. Isn't that lovely?
Oh my. Well, did things get any better then?
Unfortunately, no. Ahab's son, Ahaziah, ignored God too. Meanwhile, down in the southern kingdom of Judah, things were going a little bit better. Rehoboam and his son, Abijam, didn't do very well though. But the next 2 kings, Asa and Jehoshaphat, followed God and ruled Judah well for 66 years. But Jehoshaphat's son, Jehoram, the next king of Judah, decided to make peace with the northern kingdom by marrying the daughter of evil King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Jehoram and his wife, Athaliah, had a son named Ahaziah. When Jehoram died, Ahaziah became king. But when Ahaziah was killed just a year later, his mother made herself ruler over Judah.
Uh-oh, was she evil like her mom and dad?
She was. In fact, evil Queen Athaliah tried to kill every boy that was related to King David, so that there would be no one left in David's family.
Wait, she was trying to end the Davidic covenant all by herself? Did she do it?
She came real close.
Evil Queen Athaliah killed all of Ahaziah's sons, except one, a baby named Joash, who was only a year old. Joash's aunt, Jehosheba, took baby Joash and hid him to keep him safe. When he was 7 years old, the chief priest made Joash king, and evil Queen Athaliah was killed for her crimes.
So much killing!
The killing in 1st and 2nd Kings was not part of God's plan. God wanted one godly king to lead to another godly king. But sin has a way of messing up a really good story. Thanks to God's protection and a very brave aunt, Joash goes on to be a really good king for Judah. And the Davidic covenant survives. After Joash came Amaziah, and he was pretty good. Then came Azariah. And then Jotham, both pretty good. Next came Ahaz. He did not follow God. And then came Hezekiah, who may have been the best king of Judah since King David. But his son Manasseh was an awful king. The worst king Judah ever had. His son Amon was bad too. Amon's son Josiah was a great king who followed God and tried to get Judah to follow God again too. Josiah was followed by Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, and finally Zedekiah, who was really a governor, not a real king. Meanwhile, up in the northern kingdom, terrible King Ahab was followed by Jehoram, who was also bad. But next came Jehu, who stopped Israel from worshipping Baal. But he didn't stop them from worshipping Jeroboam's golden calves, which was bad. Then came Jehoahaz, bad. Then Jehoash, bad. And then Jeroboam II, also bad. Zechariah, bad. Shalem was only king for a month, so he didn't really have time to be good or bad. He was killed by Menahem, who became the next king.
Let me guess. Don't tell me. He was bad too.
Then came Pekahiah, bad. Pekah, bad. And last but not least, Hoshea, who, you're not even gonna believe this.
Good?
No, he was bad.
So what were God's prophets doing all this time?
Elisha now had taken over for Elijah. With all the kings doing such a lousy job, God uses Elisha almost like a king. He performs miracles to help the people and defend Judah from her enemies.
So now that we've run out of kings, what happens next?
The children of Israel have been warned over and over and over again. God told them that he would protect them and bless them if they stayed true to him and obeyed his commands. If they didn't stay true to God, enemies would come and carry them out of the promised land.
They haven't been true to God at all.
God is true to his word. For 200 years he wailed patiently for the northern tribes to turn back to him. Now he was done waiting.
In 722 BC, the Assyrians swept over Israel and completely destroyed it. The northern kingdom no longer existed.
What about the southern kingdom?
God gave Judah more time since they were the children of King David. But for every king who followed God, there was 2 more that didn't. Finally, God couldn't wait any longer. He had to do what he said he would do.
In 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians attacked and captured Jerusalem. Jerusalem was burned. Her walls pulled down. Solomon's temple, God's dwelling place for the Israelites, completely destroyed.
Oh, that's terrible!
Is this the end of God's rescue plan?
Some people thought so. There was no descendant of David on the throne of Israel. There was no throne. There was no Israel. It seemed like the worst thing that could possibly have happened to the children of Israel. The land God had promised Abraham, the land they had fought for, gone. The temple where God had lived among them, destroyed. But in the middle of this situation that seemed hopeless, God sends Isaiah with an amazing message. The blessing for the world is coming from the family of David, born of a virgin. A child is on his way. The hope of Israel, the hope of the world, Messiah.
Amazing! When did this happen? How long were they stuck in Assyria and Babylon? Did they have enough food? Did they ever get to go home?
I guess you'll just have to keep reading your Bible.